Hey, so this is Amanda, and I wanted to give you a bit of an update as to what and how I've been spending my time in this season of waiting and discernment. And God actually has just reminded me of a couple of things that I had already either worked through or needed to be kind of reinforced in my current season. I think a number of you have heard me speak on the waiting period, or as some of the writers call it, is liminal space. Basically where you're stepping out and you can't go back anymore, but you also do not know what's ahead. And this happens sometimes in terms of my own season, logistically in terms of job. Sometimes it will happen in terms of relationship. You leave some relationships the way it used to be, but you don't know yet what the future holds in terms of your own relationships or community or even new patterns. And so there's this space in between, and there are many biblical characters who hold the same space. I think Abraham is a key example. God just called him out and said, you're going to go out, and didn't actually tell him where he was going to go. And all he had to do was just say yes and follow. And this whole time where it was like, where am I going? And all the Lord was asking was him to follow. And so the Lord just reminded me that the liminal space, I'm in good company with the liminal space. And if you are waiting for something has shifted in your past, or you've let go, or you've stepped out somewhere, you're in a waiting period. Maybe the future is uncertain. You are in the liminal space. And that means, and that requires a whole different type of being, because there's nothing that you're moving toward with any conscious awareness. And so there's a way of being in this space. I think that God has, reminded me that when we're following him, waiting is not inaction. Waiting is unaction. And sometimes I think that society can make it feel like, and I'm saying society and perhaps also us, how we're wired is we're super impatient. We tend to want things now, and we talk about instant gratification. But the reality is there is a lot of waiting that happens in our lives. And it is hard if we are not good or patient, I think, with those smaller areas in our lives. It can make the waiting feel like we're doing nothing. But there is a way of waiting that actually is an action. And I think that is just cultivating a type of stillness. So this was something that God just reminded me of, that you kind of know when you hear the verse. I think it's Psalm 46 and I think 61 as well, where it's just like, be still and know that I am God. It takes a lot to be still, especially for a person like me that's very action oriented, like to feel productive in a day. But I was on a dock up north, and I was, fall colors around me, and I'm reading this book, ironically, on being fully present and the discipline of paying attention. And I just felt the Lord kind of nudge me and say, do you see the irony here? And so I put the book down, and then I lay back on the dock and just looked at the sky. And it wasn't until I lay back and was absolutely still that I saw that the clouds were very, very slowly moving. And I just felt the Lord just use this as an illustration to show that so oftentimes when we're moving, it's hard to tell where God is and where we are. And there are seasons in your life where God may call you to be still so that you can watch him work. And I think Jesus says this in Matthew 11, walk with me and watch how I do it. See the unforced rhythms of grace. And there may be certain seasons where the Lord says, I need you to be still. And it's just as much so that you can watch me work as it is for anyone else to watch me work. But when we are moving, it is very hard to figure out who is doing what. And so the Lord is saying sometimes in seasons of transition or liminal space that you need to be still so you can watch God work. And you can move after him, not before him, not ahead of him, but with him. So that was the one thing that the Lord has been reminding me of, is that action isn't doing nothing. Like waiting isn't doing nothing. It's unaction. And at this point, the waiting is the being still. The other thing that God is reminding me of, or actually just gently asked me the question, is When you take away your job or your title, your position, your relationship, whatever it is, for me it was being a pastor, I felt the Lord just very gently say, like, do you trust me with who you are, even if you don't have this title or this position or this role? And I really had, actually, I will be honest and say, I remember this question is familiar because before I even became a pastor in a church, I felt the Lord had asked me this question, like, do you believe that you are called to live this way because of the way that I'm created and wired and tend to interact? Do you believe that you are called to live this way, even if you never have the title, the position that goes with it? And that was one of the reasons that I actually started my business, because I was like, yeah, I believe it as an act of faith. I'm just going to start this sort of business on the side that I have always just had and not really pursued too much, but just as an act of faith. And after I said yes to that and took kind of this sort of action step just to acknowledge it in my own life, then the doors began to open about pursuing actual ministry positions. And I see and I look back how God prepared me for this decision of letting go of being a pastor and everything that would be, and just say, do you still trust me? Even if you don't have this position, that you're called to something like that, what this position could mean, but also that your identity is not wrapped up in it. And I think one of the things that I was reflecting on as I was listening to this really awesome podcast that I'll link below, was just that I think oftentimes there is a fear of fading into obscurity. And this author and pastor named Gordon MacDonald was reflecting on that in relative to age. He says, we have to, he's in his 80s, and he was like, we need to be prepared, older generation, to deal with the obscurity of death. But I would actually say that anyone, particularly in positions of influence, is that fading into obscurity is to not be afraid where we don't make an impact, and that's fine, because our value and our identity doesn't rest on our ability to influence. And so I also have seen that while I've taken the pastor hat off, and if you want to say faded into obscurity, like gone away to hide and pray and wait, that the Lord has just been reinforcing with me that my identity and my value doesn't come from how many posts I write or sermons I preach. My identity and my value is rooted in God's love for me. And what a great thing to be reminded of. In a season where who knows where this could lead, there's such peace that I have from that acceptance of who I am as God's child, even if I'm not, oh dear, the Dutch me is freaking out, even not being productive in a day. So I just want to leave you with those two questions. Just perhaps asking yourself, are you being still enough? And it may not look like me stepping back in a job, but I would say every day there is an opportunity to just stop what you are doing and ask where and how you see God moving, where that was only Him. And I'll link a great tool called the Prayer of Examine below, and that is just a great way at the end of the day to reflect on how you saw God moving. The other thing I would encourage you to reflect on is, who are you without your title, without your job, without your career, without your role, relationship status, whatever it is. Do you understand and know, not just in your head, but in your heart, how deeply loved and valued you are, not because of what you do, but because of who you are? So that is some of the questions I'd love for you to reflect on, and some of the things I'm learning in the waiting stage. Have a great day.